to the end of another busy day. You just saw 20, 30 patients, maybe more. Instead of heading home for dinner with your spouse or playing with your kids, you now begin your night job, charting. Charting is critical for patient care, billing, and medical legal liability, but it steals our focus from our patients, eats away at our time with our families, and keeps us up at night. The burden of always having another chart to complete drains all of us. Freed listens, prepares your notes, and writes patient instructions for you. Charting is done before your patient walks out of the room. Wait, because it gets better. Freed learns your style over time. It's AI, just like a human scribe would, except it will never quit on you. Freed is loved by 3,000 plus clinicians from every specialty. It's HIPAA compliant, takes 30 seconds to learn, and costs only $99 a month. You can try Freed for free right now by going to freed.ai, Freed.ai. Listeners of the Physician's Guide to Doctoring can use the code PGD50 for $50 off the first month. This is part 2 of our Points and Miles conversation with Dr. Devon Gimbel. And if you haven't heard it yet, check out part 1 and also check out our episode that came out February 1st, 2024 called Jet Set Go, Points and Miles Doc on the secrets of smart travel. All your points and miles needs. Hey, this is Brad Block, host of The Physician's Guide to Doctoring. This is a personal and professional development podcast for physicians where we have experts on the show that try to teach us everything we should have been learning while we were memorizing Krebs cycle. So when we do book those flights on Swiss, and I heard you talking, shout out to the frugal physician, Dr. Disha Spath, we love her on the show, about this particular issue, is that if we're, the way I've typically booked it, because I've wanted to accumulate more miles. So I'll buy it through Chase's app. I'll buy the plane tickets through Chase's app. And I just assumed sometimes we'll use the miles for that. Sometimes we'll just pay with cash, but I should be booking it through Chase's app. But what I heard you say on her show is not necessarily, is they're going to have partners, airline partners, and you can book it like there might be Air, I don't know, Cathay Pacific. Just like another completely, they fly to another continent and yet they're airline partners. And if I'd use their website, I might get a much better deal than if I go through the Swiss website or through the Chase website.
Yes.
Can you tell us about that?
Absolutely. And I think this is one of the biggest areas that when people start to understand this is what really unlocks and opens up for so many folks so getting just outrageous amount of value from their points. So let me kind of break this down step by step, and then you tell me kind of either where you have questions or where you think that there's something that you want to argue with or you want to have a different opinion about. And I think that conversation could be really interesting. So this is what happens for so many people is that say they have a type of credit card that earns these, we call them transferable points. And I'll be specific about what that means in a second. But a lot of people might have an American Express card. So they're earning a lot of Amex points, or you love Chase. I love Chase as well. They have Chase credit cards. They're earning Chase points. Now, what's so interesting to me is that these banks do not tell consumers the best way to use their points. Because this is what will happen is you log into your credit card account. This happens if you log into Amex, happens if you log into Chase. And let's say that you have, again, I'm just going to use like ballpark numbers here just for ease. Let's say you have 100,000 points that you have earned on your credit cards in that specific bank. I did this with Amex the other day because it was just fun to see the difference. Is that, let's say you log into Amex, you've got 100,000 American Express points and you're thinking like, great, I want to do something great with these points. And specifically, there's a section in all of these, credit card accounts have a section about like, use your points, and it'll show you the different options. And Amex actually has 5 different options laid out. And it starts with something like, use this for a statement credit, right? Where you can actually apply your points to bring down the total cost of your current statement. Okay. And they will tell you, it's basically cash back, but they will tell you like your 100,000 points are worth X amount of dollars. And in this scenario, Amex will tell you your 100,000 points are worth $600. I was like, okay, saving $600 is great. But then if you keep looking at these different options, like option number 2 is something like if you're making a purchase through PayPal or another vendor, again, you can use your Amex points and defray the cost of that. So your 100,000 points are going to be worth $600 or $700. Like, oh, okay, great. A little bit more. another option, you can trade in your Amex points for a gift card, right? And you're like, oh, this is great. I'm going to get, I don't even know what Amex does because I never do this. Maybe it's like an Apple gift card, an Olive Garden gift card, whatever the case may be. And your 100,000 points might be worth $800 in gift cards. And now you're thinking, oh, this is great. I'll get this for, whatever, my office staff for all of the, annual year gifts or something like that. And then kind of like at the far end of the spectrum, it'll say, book your travel through Amex or book your travel through Chase. And I think this is what you're saying your experience is, where you have your 100,000 points. And if you want to book a flight through Amex, that Swiss flight, to go home, what they'll let you do is you can look up, the flights that you're interested in, and you can apply your points, against the cost of that flight. And they'll tell you your 100,000 points are worth $1,000. And so of the options that you've looked at so far, that is going to look like it's so valuable, right? I mean, I think all of us would rather, given the choice, do you want $1,000 or do you want $600? We're all going to pick 1,000, and we're thinking, this is amazing, right? Like saving $1,000 is so great. Now, what Amex, and I'm not picking on Amex, this is all of the main credit cards that do this. What they don't go out of their way to tell you is that if instead of using your points, again, to book travel through your credit card account or through their travel platform, if instead you do what they allow you to do and have set up for you to do, which is called transfer your points. It literally means that all of these different credit cards, they have a menu of a bunch of different airlines and hotel programs where you can say, hey, I actually want to take my Amex account points. I want to move them entirely outside of American Express, and I want to send them instead to Air France airline, or I want to send them instead to, like you said, Cathay Pacific airline. And then I'm going to use them through that airline's booking program to book my flights. Now, that sounds complicated. It's really not that complicated. But the reason why this is so much more valuable is because when your credit card points live in your credit card account, they have that designated fixed value that your credit card account assigns to them. And it's always low. It's always, like you said, like you saw, like 0.6, cents for every point you have, up to maybe 1 cent or 1.5 cents per point. But when you move them out of your credit card account, they no longer have a fixed value, which means that you can get twice as much value from them, 4 times, sometimes 10 times as much value. So speaking to that example about Swiss is that I'm just going to pretend, let's say you and your wife, you're flying over there. This is a big, milestone trip, and you've decided you want to fly business class because you want to be able to sleep on the plane. You want to arrive not completely jet lagged with all of your joints, driving you crazy. And so you want to use your points to book these business class flights on Swiss. So again, let's say you go into your Chase account, and I'm going to pretend you've got 1 million Chase points because, you've been saving up for years. You're putting all your personal and business expenses on there. You've got 1 million Chase points, and you go and you type in, the dates you want to travel, and you find the Swiss business class flights that you want to take. Well, Chase will say your 1 million Chase points, those are going to be worth somewhere between $10,000 up to maybe $15,000 in value based on the cards that you actually have with Chase. So let's just go on the high end. Let's say they're going to let you use 1 million points for $15,000 worth of flights. That may actually get you 2 round trip business class flights, depending on what the cash cost. This is why I have points. I'm happy to use my 1 million points to get $15,000 worth of flights because this is just a really great redemption. Again, what Chase doesn't tell you is that you can move your points. You don't even have to move all 1 million of them over to one of their transfer partners. I think a great example in this scenario is Air Canada Aeroplan. It's a major airline in Canada. They obviously fly to and from Canada, but they have 40 different airline partners as well, which means that not only can you book Air Canada flights through Air Canada, you can book flights on Swiss Airlines. You can book flights on Lufthansa Airlines. You can book flights on Oman Airlines. I mean, they literally have 40 different airlines that cover the entire world that you can book flights on. And those business class flights, like if Swiss Airlines has said, oh, we're going to give a certain number of economy or business class seats to our airline partners and allow people to book those seats using their points, you can book a one-way business class flight from the States to Switzerland on Swiss Airlines for 70,000 points per person. So if you wanted to,
while we were talking,
you could
down and on or you're making all this up.
Yeah, no. I'm not making this up. No, seriously. So, and I think that's the difference is that, okay, you can use 1 million Chase points to book 2 round-trip business class flights and get $15,000 worth of value, which is a ton of value, right? Would you rather use 1 million Chase points to do that? Or would you rather use 280,000 Chase points to do that? The same exact flight, literally the same exact flight.
So how do you know who the partners are? And then do I have to check all of them?
Oh, such a good question. Okay, so in terms of how do you know who the partners are? If you already have credit cards that are earning points, so like you said, you have Chase credit cards, so you already theoretically have a log on, where you can log onto your account online. If you already are earning points in one of these types of points currencies, log into your account, and they will all have an option where when you go into the area where you can see your points and use your points, they will all have that option that says something like transfer or move to transfer partners. And when you go there, you'll see the whole list available to you. So Chase will show you the whole list of the specific airlines and the specific hotel programs that you can transfer your Chase points over to. It's the same thing with the other, credit card accounts. If you don't already have a credit card account open and you're actually using potential airline or hotel partners as one of your decision factors about, wow, what type of points would actually be the most valuable for me if I want to be sure that I have access to a specific airline. This is very common for folks like, your travel pattern. You go to one place very, very frequently because of family. So many folks, right, have families that are in different areas of the world, and that may be a very, very common kind of trip for them. Some people are constantly...
You go to Florida or Aruba.
Yeah, no, exactly. But, maybe your family's in India. Maybe your family is in the Philippines, right? Or you're very frequently flying, your parents or other family members, from your place of origin to come and visit you. So there might be that one airline that is just the one you always turn to. So, you would preferentially want to pick a type of credit card points that then is going to allow you to access transferring your points over to that airline. This is very simple. Now that, we have Google, you can very, very easily Google either, Chase transfer partners if you want to see what those are, or if you want to go in the reverse, like, again, let's just say Cathay Pacific is an airline that you want to fly all the time or have access to. You can Google, what credit cards are transfer partners of Cathay Pacific. And then that will tell you, oh, American Express is. So maybe for that person, the Amex cards are the most valuable.
So, okay. So Chase is going to have a list of its partners, and then Swiss is going to have a list of its partners. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the overlap. Am I going to look at it on that individual airline's website and see which one's the cheapest one and then apply my points? Like, how am I navigating, figuring out which airline to book?
Yes, so that is going to take a little bit more patience and practice because that might not be something that's really, really obvious from the beginning. But essentially what you want to do is, again, based on the credit card points that you have, once you understand what are the specific airlines that are transfer partners of that specific credit card currency, then what you want to do is go to those different transfer partners and run. When I say go to them, what I mean is pull up the booking website for that airline. So for Chase, like I said, Air Canada Aeroplan is a partner. I would go to Air Canada Aeroplan's website where it would say like, I want to book a flight, from New York to Geneva on these dates. Let me just say that, right? So then what you would do is run that search and it'll tell you, there's a button you can click that's going to return search results for you in points value versus booking in cash value. So you just click the button that says, search for me in points, and then it'll return all of the different options that are available to you through that airline. And so what you want to do is actually for the Chase partners is look at the different Chase partner airlines, run your search and see which one gives me the cheapest option on Swiss. And that's not that hard to do because none of these credit card accounts have 97 airline partners. So you're not running 97 different airline searches. You're probably going to end up searching maybe 3 or 4 websites. But again, that could take you less than 5 minutes. So, this is not like an intensive thing.
Yeah. Especially since we're a family of 5, we're talking like in the thousands here. My hourly rate is not so high that it's definitely worth the time. And that's, like that, it seems to be that's a big way to unlock the value. Like that's the different, cash back. It gives you 1.5 to 1 maybe, and miles, maybe you get a little more, a little less. But then when you're really multiplying the value when you can find these flights where your points are really worth a lot more.
Yes. And I think especially for folks who, again, if you have what I consider to be high expenses. And I actually say that in a really good way because I look at my expenses as doing a lot of work for me, right? Like they have done a lot of work for me in terms of the number of points I've earned and what I've been able to do with those points is that especially if you are spending multiple 5 or 6 or multiple 6 figures a year on credit cards, again, whether that's personal spend, especially if you're a business owner where it's not at all hard, to have high business expenses. Yeah, exactly.
Spending this money anyway, make it work for you.
Absolutely. And, we're not talking here about put expenses on credit cards for 5 years and then earn enough points so that you can maybe take one-way domestic flight. I don't think a lot of us would actually find that to be a really impactful return, on our investment in terms of, the time it takes, to decide which card do I want to use and how do I want to use these points. But when you learn, again, it does not have to be at the extreme end of the spectrum, but when you learn just some fundamental, straightforward ways to earn and use points, you can literally get thousands, tens of thousands of dollars worth of value out of these points, especially compared to using them, again, just straight through your credit card account, where you will get value. You're just going to get much lower value from them.
Doctors like us have demanding schedules, so growing our portfolio shouldn't be another burden. And the last thing we want when we take off our scrubs is a call from a tenant about an overflowing toilet. So Equity Multiple brings us streamlined access to vetted real estate investments that work for us, even when we're off the clock. And only 5% make the cut. Once we invest, a team of professionals goes to work to maximize our returns. With a minimum investment of just $5,000, diversify outside the stock market with cash flowing CRE like multifamily, industrial self-storage, and more. Welcome to modern real estate investing. Visit equitymultiple.com to learn more. That's equitymultiple.com. Do you have a little more time? Because I have a couple more questions. One of them came from a listener. They said, you know what, they go on vacation, they have these Hyatt cards, right? But they like to stay at little boutique hotels. They don't like to stay at these like larger hotels, or they stay on Airbnbs. And, there are some perks that you get with some cards, like you get an extra bag, or you get lounge access. But they're like, you know what, we just eat at the restaurant before we get on our flight and we don't pack that much. We don't need the. So there are all these other perks that you can get from having these cards. And they're like, listen, we don't really use all those perks. Like, is there a different strategy for us than for other people if we're taking that into account?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this can be true, again, regardless of like how much money you spend in terms of what you budget for your trips. I think in terms of credit cards, the different cards that are available to you is that even I don't have all of them. I know I have a lot, but even I don't have every single, potential points or miles earning credit card that's out there. And I think what really can be impactful is doing a first step of just evaluating what's important to me, right? So matching that up then with cards that are going to give you the most return for what it is you're looking for. I actually think the vast majority of people don't need and won't benefit from airline-specific credit cards or hotel-specific credit cards. Certainly some people can. If you're a frequent traveler, obviously, yes. But for a lot of people, those specific types of cards are not actually ones that I think people tend to benefit from a lot. Instead, I think people get so much more value out of focusing on these credit cards that allow them to earn those transferable points. So they're not going to be specific to an airline or hotel. They're going to be the Chase cards, the Capital One cards, Citi, American Express cards. So you don't have to, again, I think the beautiful thing about points and miles is that there's so many different ways to use them, even within travel, that understanding what are your travel patterns or your travel goals, first and foremost, there's probably going to be still a good number of cards that are going to be a great fit for you. And I think that this is true, again, especially when I started this whole hobby, I was married, but we didn't have kids, and I did predominantly solo travel. And so what I needed to get out of my points when I was traveling by myself, and a lot of the travel I was doing was international travel, where these were long haul flights I wanted to be comfortable on. This looks very different than the travel I do now during my kids' spring break with an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old in tow. Not every single one of us, again, is going to be looking for what is that one hotel credit card that's going to give us a free night. That's not actually that relevant to me in my life right now. But instead, being able to use my Chase points, my Amex points, so that I don't have to pay these just astronomical fees, even for economy flights that we're seeing now, to be able to use my points so that my family can go on a spring break, because it can be very expensive, to fly. Again, I know you have a family as well, to fly, 4 or 5 people, even on a not necessarily long flight. I think one of the greatest things about points and miles is you get to pick and choose what's going to have the biggest impact for you in terms of what do you want to get out of points, or where are you happy to spend your travel budget, and where would you love to not have to spend your travel budget if a card was going to give you that instead.
That makes sense. If you tend to fly places that are pretty close, the flight's not that expensive, but then you go and you want to stay in a luxury hotel, then it makes sense to have the hotel favored cards. But if you tend to travel to, far away places and stay in Airbnbs or not such deluxe accommodations, then the flight is going to be a major part. So, I guess it's where do you spend your money so that you don't have to spend your money?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's also, again, I'm going to continue to plug this because I actually think these are so helpful. It's why I love the transferable points, because you're not locked into one way of using them. And Chase Points is such a great example. Before I had kids, I used almost all my Chase Points actually for flights, so that I could fly for a medical conference in Paris, or I could fly, somewhere because I solo travel a lot. I never cared about hotels when I solo traveled, as long as it was relatively close to where I needed to be and it had a private bathroom. I mean, really, that was the bar for me. I'm like, do I have my own bathroom? I don't care otherwise. Then we started traveling with our kids, especially when they were younger. And, you've got 2 kids. They have totally different nap schedules, totally different sleep schedules. You're sharing, typically, if you're in a traditional hotel, you're sharing a 200 or 300 square foot room, between you and 2 kids, and it's miserable. We did that one time, and I said, I'm either never going to travel with these kids again, or we have to find a different way. And that's the point at which actually we really shifted our Chase strategy. Now we use almost all of our Chase points for Hyatt stays, because Hyatt is a unique hotel chain in that they actually allow you upfront to use your points if you want to, and if they're available, to book straight into a true 1-bedroom suite, which has been truly a lifesaver for my family when we travel. And those are usually outrageously expensive. I come from the world of spending $37 a night, for hotel accommodations for myself. I couldn't fathom spending, $1,200 a night on a 1-bedroom suite. Now, to be able to use our Chase points, again, we can transfer them to a hotel when there's enormous value for us there, but we're not locked into that, right? So we can use our Chase points in other ways too. And so, this is why I think it's, especially for most people, having those transferable points just expands the options of what you can do with them, which makes them even more valuable.
So I have a couple of small questions left about taking advantage of the business versus the personal. And I have a small business with small monthly expenses. That's this podcast, right? But if I sign up for a card that has a big welcome bonus, I might not hit the minimum to get that welcome bonus. Can I put some of my personal expenses on that card? I'm not going to be telling my accountant that those are business expenses, right? I'm not going to be deducting them illegally and committing tax fraud.
Good. Yeah. And we're not advocating for that here.
Just buy groceries for a little while, on that card until I hit the minimum. Or is that not okay?
Yeah.
I'm saying it out loud. It really sounds okay.
Yeah. I think there's a couple things to think about here, which is for people, again, who are a little bit newer to this hobby, may not sort of understand all the options open to them. A lot of banks have personal credit cards and they have business credit cards, right? And the way they have these structured is because business expenses tend to look a little bit different than personal expenses. Most traditional businesses don't have really high, grocery store spend, whereas a lot of personal people are probably buying groceries, so that's kind of one difference there. And with business credit cards, one of the reasons they can be really attractive, not only because you have a business and you want to have a totally separate credit card to use for your business expenses, is that they do tend to offer much higher initial welcome bonuses than personal cards, meaning that when you first get approved for the card, as long as you meet a minimum spend that the bank will tell you what it is, you earn this huge bolus of points up front, which is really great. And business cards do tend to have better welcome bonuses.
You refer to that as a bolus.
Right. I think it's the second one. They tend to call it I think it's officially called a welcome offer, and people in the points world, sometimes it's called a sign-up bonus. Sometimes it's called a welcome bonus. I do tend to call it a bolus. That is probably influenced by my medical background. All things being the same, it's just a big chunk of points that, get deposited in your account, again, when you meet that minimum spend requirement. But like you said, Sometimes you might run into the scenario, though, where you get approved for a business credit card. And I'm going to take one example. American Express has a business card called the Business Platinum Card. And usually you have to spend $15,000 on that card within a designated period of time. Let's just say 3 months in order to earn your really big welcome bonus or welcome bolus. And you, like you said, for your podcast business, you may not actually have $15,000 worth of expenses in that specific time period. And so there's a couple ways to approach this question. The short answer is yes, you can put personal expenses on a business credit card. Now, that being said, I think that there are a couple of kind of best practices to consider. Number one, and I always like to preface these conversations by saying I'm not a financial or tax professional, so please always consult a real one for your own specific questions, your own specific scenario. But in general, in terms of best practices, if I'm going to use a business credit card for personal spend because I want to use my personal expenses, to meet that welcome bonus requirement, or because I just want to put my personal expenses on that business card because it offers some really great maybe bonus categories or something like that, I personally keep business and personal expenses totally separate. So if I have a business card that I'm going to put personal expenses on, I don't put any business expenses on it whatsoever. I do not let those two things mix personally. And then also, like you said, if you do have a business credit card, and maybe you just made a mistake, especially if you've got a couple of different cards, maybe you accidentally put, a personal expense on a business card. That is one of those things that, yes, of course, we would never, ever, ever, for tax purposes, claim that that was a business expense or claim that that should be a deduction. And then you just work it out with your bookkeeper and your accountant, to make sure that those two things are separated. But I actually think that it's cleaner to use any given credit card only for business or only for personal expenses.
So you can do it. You don't recommend it.
I don't recommend it. I don't recommend to mix the two together. And I obviously do not recommend tax fraud, which you were not suggesting, but I definitely don't recommend putting business expenses or personal expenses on a business card and then claiming those as business expenses.
Okay, so similar vein, like let's say I have a personal card that gets a ton of benefits for travel, right? You've got one of those, high monthly or high annual expense cards, but because it's a small business without, much business expense, you've got a business card that just doesn't earn that many points for, let's say, travel. And so if you're booking business travel, and this is the same thing, you might give the same answer, as you said, because it's cleaner, but can I book my business travel using my personal cards so that I can get more points out of it?
Yes. So yes. And so let's kind of tease this apart. Yes, technically you can. So here's one example is there are a couple of personal airline specific credit cards that by virtue of having that credit card, you automatically gain access to that airline's lounges when you travel. So like United has a credit card like this, American has a credit card like this. So maybe you're traveling a lot on a specific airline and you want to be able to access that lounge whenever you're traveling and you're flying on that airline. So let's say you get a United, it's called a United Infinite card, gives you access to United club lounges whenever you're flying United, even if you are flying in economy, which can be why some people really love, having this type of card. Now, let's say that you are traveling for business, right? Can you put your business flight on your technically personal United card? Yes, you can. One of the things, of course, that you want to do, again, is make sure that you're consulting with your tax professionals, your financial professionals, make sure that you know exactly how to keep all of this clean in terms of your bookkeeping for your business. But one of the other things that I think is important to keep in mind is that when we look at personal versus business credit cards, one of the differences is in terms of like consumer protections. And so sometimes one of the things that you're going to want to be sure about is that if you are booking travel specifically for business, it can be better to put that on a business credit card because there's different protections in terms of the different insurances that are offered, when there's like trip delay, trip cancellation. Some credit cards offer things like car rental insurance, but in order for you to be able to take advantage of those benefits, you have to prove that you were doing business travel and that you used a business credit card for that expense. And so that's one of those things that, is sort of adjacent to the actual question about just how many points can I earn or, where do I want to put this expense in terms of, again, it's just, I'll get more benefit from the points earning perspective from a personal versus business card. But you do also want to keep in mind some of those other, those other issues in terms of where are you actually more protected if you need to take advantage of some of your credit card benefits.
You get really granular with this stuff. It's really quite amazing.
I think this is what happens when you take someone with a medical background. And I think this might actually also have to do with the fact that I'm a pathologist by training. And so most of us love, organization, categorization, and breaking things down. And so I joke with a lot of people like, this is what happens, when you let a pathologist loose in the world of points and miles, is that we do end up getting fairly granular with plans and with details and stuff like that. I don't know if that's a good thing, but I do think it is impacted by my medical background.
Well, you've given us some incredible advice. I'm sure all my listeners are going to be changing how they manage their credit card points and miles, and they'll extract some more, benefit from them. And so if they want to take a deeper dive, I know you have your own podcast, Point Me to First Class, and they can find you at your website, also pointmetofirstclass.com. Dr. Gimbel, thank you so much for your time, your expertise, and what you're doing to help professionals like us physicians live our best lives.
Well, thank you so much for just giving me the time to have this amazing conversation. It was so enjoyable, and I just really appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks for listening. I have a favor to ask. You listened to the episode until the end, which means you either fell asleep or you really liked the episode. So please share it or like it or comment on a social media post or write us a 5-star review, something. It would really help me out. And maybe what you learned from this episode can help someone else too. The views expressed in this episode are those of the interviewer and interviewee and don't represent the views of their employer or even their significant other. Even though the magic of podcasting make it sound like I'm talking directly to you. This is not a doctor-patient relationship, and this is not medical advice, or financial advice, or really any advice. Thank us again for listening to The Physician's Guide to Doctoring.